Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about this, the Leica M11, why I bought it, and we're gonna absolutely massacre a Ricoh GR3. I started photography in 1993. I got a little film camera. My stepmother gave it to me for Christmas. So I started taking some pictures, and obviously, I'm 8 years old. I couldn't really afford to just like do a ton of photo shoots and have them developed. I just had a couple rolls, got them developed, and that's kind of how it started. In high school, I had a photography class, but it was not inspiring at all. I'm pretty sure I failed it, or at least got a D. And then in college, my best friend gets me a job at Circuit City. The digital camera girl ends up having to leave to go to college out of state. So I move over there to the camera department, and I really kind of found my home. I honestly knew every model we had. It was like a horseshoe shaped display with cameras lined up all around it. And I did have, at one point, every single camera memorized by model number. My number one seller was the DSC-W55 from Sony and the Panasonic DMC-FX8K. I'm really gonna sum up 20 years of photography as best I can. So I'm working at Circuit City. I get a G9. This is my original G9. It got broken by dropping it accidentally a few times. So I bought another one off eBay, and I took all the good parts I could off of my original, put it on here. This is my Frankenstein G9. So basically I had this cool little camera for a really long time, from my college life to being a young adult. This did it for me because it took great photos. It shot raw. I mean, this is, I think, 12 megapixels. In 2007, that was a really big deal. I loved having something I could take everywhere. And then eventually, I dropped it. It died in Miami. My girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, gave me this Panasonic camera. Has a Leica lens on there. So I get this camera, and I'm taking it around, shooting a lot. I go to Miami again. I go to Miami every year, taking snapshots. A photographer friend of mine's like, "Hey man, those are good. Let me see your camera." And I pulled this out. He was like, "Wow, I thought you had a real camera. You should try to photograph people." My girlfriend was telling me that at the time too. I was always kind of standoffish about photographing people. I think a lot of you can probably relate to that. That jump from taking pictures of like landscapes to photographing strangers and, people you've just met for the first time. I take their advice. I get a Rebel T4i, then eventually upgrade to a 7D Mark II, to a 6D, 5D Mark III, 1DX Mark II. So I jumped through all those over like an 8-year span. And then around that time, photography just becomes kind of boring to me. It feels like work. I've been shooting Canon for like 8 years straight, all DSLRs. I just remembered feeling like photography was work. So I sell the 1DX Mark II and I hang out for a while. So after selling the 1DX and like taking a break from photography, I buy a Ricoh GR3. And I'm like, this is my new G9. This is a little camera that's awesome. I can take it everywhere. So I go to Miami again, like I do every year, and I'm taking pictures of the sunrise. I'm at the shore, right on the water. A splash, like some mist lands on this camera, and it shorts it out. Like all the buttons stop working on the back. The lens gets stuck out. Sometimes you can if a lens gets stuck out, you can turn it off and on and like twist and try to force it back on. I mean, this is just broken. Yeah, look at that, it's crooked now. So yeah, the GR3 is a great camera, but it's not very durable. And I did buy a protection plan from B&H on this camera. And so I get home and I'm like, "Hey guys," I send an email. I'm like, "Hey, I want to cash in my protection plan because my camera got wet and it's messed up." And they're like, "Oh, you don't actually have a protection plan. Your credit card got denied 8 months after you bought it." Some like really long time frame that makes no sense. And I was like, "Well, why didn't you guys tell me it got declined and I would have paid with a different card?" It just went through emails. And long story short, B&H was like, "Yeah, you bought one at that time, but we secretly canceled it and said that your credit card got denied." It makes no sense. So I was just SOL with this camera. And I bought that protection plan because I knew this wasn't weather sealed, and I wanted to take it around with me and actually use it, not have to feel like I'm walking on eggshells. So anyway, B&H just kind of left me high and dry on this camera, which is pretty much a letdown because I still shop with them. So anyway, this camera is broken. It does not work. Side note, I've been training with maces for a few years now. They're really good for your shoulders. It's like the best shoulder rehab strengthening tool that there is if you have shoulder problems. My left arm used to be way skinnier than my right arm because of a shoulder injury. And I would wake up at night with my shoulder just throbbing in pain. It would wake me up. I start doing mace swings, and now I compete. I win arm wrestling medals with my left arm. It's completely rehabbed. Mace training is so good for your shoulders. I want to smash this with a mace once I finally talk about it and make this camera appear on YouTube. So if anyone would like to see that, I have a 22-pound mace and a 35-pound mace. So I think I want to hit it with the 35 in slow motion, and we can see 35-pound bowling ball smashing into it. Will do. Ricoh GR3, RIP. So anyway, I had the Ricoh GR3. It died, so I didn't have a camera again for a little while. But I am a photographer at heart. I cannot stop taking pictures. I feel compelled to take photos if I just see good light. So I was like, all right, you know what? I'm gonna go old school and get a Hasselblad. So I get a 503 CX with the 80mm planar, and I also get the 120 macro planar f4. So like I did some test rolls because I was developing the film at home. Like I taught myself C41, developing, rolling it and all that stuff. And when I first started developing that film, like I would roll it in my closet and I'd put a big comforter over my head. And then, cause I was trying to make like the most light proof area for me to roll my film in. And I would end up like sweating under this blanket, and then my fingers would get sticky. And if you ever have like wet fingers and you're touching film, it sticks to the film, then it doesn't want to roll. Anyway, if you're interested in starting to develop your own film, just buy one of those black bags that you can put your hands in and save yourself some trouble. So I learned how to develop film, and then I do like a project where I rent this nice house in Charleston, and I have 3 girls come through. I shoot 21 rolls of film that day, go home, develop all those myself, but I got some good shots. And then I went to Hawaii like a couple weeks after that. I shot another 21 rolls. I got some pretty stuff. I haven't shared it. I don't know why. Like the idea is to cover up my wall with like prints. You know, I shoot 21 rolls again. It's kind of funny. That's my number. I go home, develop them all, get some really good shots. So eventually, after developing all that film, the Hasselblad started to kind of feel like a chore too, and it's kind of expensive. It sits for a while, and then I buy a Leica Q2 because, I mean, I saw the Q2 when I was looking at the GR3, but I was just being cheap, and I was like, man, that's like 6 times the price of a Ricoh. So I'll just buy the Ricoh and a protection plane. So anyway, I finally break down and buy the Q2, and that camera, I mean, I only got that like 6 months ago. The Q2 is like such an incredible camera. 20 years of doing photography, I got some of my best stuff ever, like just without even trying, just like random happy little accidents. So I was seeing this quality there. I'm a firm believer in this too. Like some photographers can have the nicest gear in the world and their photos won't be very impressive. I mean, I'm not hating, it's just, I think some of you know what I'm talking about. Some photographers can have just a cell phone and get great shots, and you give them a DSLR and you can see a whole other level of quality. There seems to be, with photography, equipment can only do so much for you. The better photographer you are, the better equipment you have, the nicer your photos are. I firmly believe that. So I got this Q2, and I started finding this new plateau for me, this new level that I haven't really been at before. That made me like fired up for photography again. Like originally it was just supposed to be a G9 replacement, but then I found myself wanting to do some portraits with it, and I've never felt comfortable at 28mm doing headshots. I've been taking the Q2 around with me on my modeling jobs, just doing like behind the scenes photos. There's a lot of hurry up and wait. Sometimes they're just changing lighting or shooting a different model, and you just kind of got to hang out for a while. But I was at this shoot with a girl who I was like, man, like I know I could get some good photos of her. And while we're like waiting for them to change lighting setups, I was like, hey, can we go just around the side of the building real quick and let me snap a couple portraits of you? I have this really nice camera, you know, I had my Q2. So I just take 2 pictures. It was at that moment that I wished I had a 50 or 75mm lens. I was like, man, I know I could have gotten a good shot there, but I did feel like I hit a wall with that 28mm. And at that point, I decided I was gonna get an M camera. Originally, I was like, I can keep the Q2 because the lens on that camera is worth more than the camera itself, basically. And then I could just get like an M8 with a 75, have a portrait camera and my wide angle camera. But if I was gonna do that, then I'd have 2 cameras. I'd be carrying around 2 memory cards, 2 battery chargers. It would be an ordeal. I knew that's not the way I wanted to go. So I eventually looked at all the M models and just decided I'll get the M11. I'll get the newest one. Battery life's better, internal storage, better screen. If I was gonna spend that much money, a 10R is almost the same price as an M11. You might as well get the newest one. So I did, and here it is. And I have no regrets. This is a little bit bigger than my original G9, but not by a whole lot. Of course, this lens goes back in so you can fit it in your pocket, but still, this is still pretty small, relatively speaking. And I like the M camera system because the Hasselblad, obviously you have to slow down, take your pictures seriously. This is basically every camera I've ever had into one. So I like to look at this as my G9, all my Canon DSLRs, the Ricoh, not the Ricoh, we're not even counting that. That Panasonic, my Hasselblad, all got melted down and poured into a mold, and this came out. The most beautiful camera I've ever had, and the best camera I've ever had.